Oh boy, my favorite show. Boring. We need to be mad. We need to be angry. We're thinking too much around here, guys. How dare you?
How dare you?
That is so cool. That is so fun. Oh my god, dude. That's so big, dude. We gotta have a better ground game to overpower the corporate media structure and the propaganda. I'm right on the polling. I'm right on that. That's undisputed in my mind. That's undisputed in my mind. Politics is more complicated than that. Waging political capital in an effective way. Boring. Politics is more complicated than that. That is so cool. That is so fun. Oh boy, my favorite show. Boring. We need to be mad. We need to be angry. We're thinking too much around here, guys. How dare you? That is so cool. That is so fun. Oh my god, dude. That's so big, dude. We gotta have a better ground game to overpower the corporate media structure and the propaganda. Ew. I'm right on the polling. I'm right on that. That's undisputed in my mind. Who's Red Skull? That's undisputed in my mind.
I don't know.
Politics is more complicated than that. Waging political capital in an effective way. Boring.
I ain't know nothing about what's going on.
Politics is more complicated than
I ain't
that.
know nothing about anything.
That is so cool. That is so fun.
I ain't got no clue about nothing. I ain't got no none clue about nothing. Darn tootin'. Ain't got no clue about
my
nothing.
favorite show. Boring. We need to be mad. We need to be angry. We're thinking too much around here, guys.
We're thinking too much.
Oh shit. How dare you?
Where am I? I don't know.
That is so
I don't know
cool.
where I am.
That is so fun.
I am in the country of I don't know. Trump. You see Trump's head above me? He's cute. This BG is new. This isn't new. I've been using this for like a couple months now. Oh, yeah, this isn't new. Psh. This ain't not new at all. I have been finishing up schoolwork and all that stuff. This is the new setup I'm working with. This is going to be the new stuff. I'll mess with it until it's perfect. But this is usually what I'm going to be using now. For most stuff. Isn't Red Skull a Nazi guy? My ham is doing okay. I don't know. I don't know. All right. I'm really just hanging out, to be honest. Ugh. Look at this. Look at this. Beautiful. Oh, wait. Look at... Oh, my God. Beautiful setup. I didn't watch this yet. I don't know. It's already played that much. All right. I'm playing Rocket League. How loud is this? Ooh, not loud at all. You don't gotta hear the rocket. I was gonna play Rocket League and listen to Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson talk, but I decided, hey, why not go live on YouTube and do that? Because whatever. Let's see what it's all about.
There's a group of people who, by your own admission, are disaffected and angry and alienated and young, and I'm helping them. And why is that exactly a problem? What is it that I'm supposed to be doing with them? Just out of
Oh
curiosity. What do you
shit,
think?
he's getting
If you
heated.
had your druthers, would I ignore them?
Oh my god.
Returning to the show today is my very good friend, our very first guest, man who
He's standing
premiered
up
the
for
Ben
all the
Shapiro
young
Show Sunday
men.
Special, Jordan Peterson. He returns to discuss his newest book, Beyond Order: 12 More Rules for Life, and we're going to jump into as many of the new rules as we have time
What a
for today.
genius. I
In
love Jordan
2018,
P.
this book's predecessor, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, along with a slew of viral YouTube videos, transformed Jordan into a pop culture luminary. Since he has last joined us, he's traveled the world speaking to hundreds of thousands of people, influencing listeners to better understand and take control of their lives. A couple of years have passed since 12 Rules for Life was released. It continues to live at the top of all the book charts. His latest looks to be captivating readers in exactly the same way.
Should I read that?
Recently, leftists had the audacity to paint Jordan as a murderous Nazi in Marvel Comics.
The
That's just the latest in
audacity.
the swipes the left has taken at him. We're going to talk about
The
what
left
it
is
is about
trying
Jordan
to
that has made him
criminalize
public
Jordan
enemy
Peterson.
number one.
I mean, didn't Jordan Peterson believe in a bunch of like Cold War propaganda? And he makes all of his arguments predicated on the idea that there is a global cabal of like neo-Marxists who are setting the stage for how the world is ran. So basically the Jewish question or whatever. And that's why neo-Nazis love Jordan Peterson. So comparing him to a Nazi comic character isn't exactly a reach. It's not a far-fetched idea.
We'll also discuss how we become our best selves and what causes us to admire others, how you can learn mythology and religion to understand your life, and Jordan's thoughts on love, sex, romance, and relationships in connection to your humanity. Hey, and welcome. This is the Ben Shapiro Show Sunday Special. This show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Don't like big tech and the government spying on you? Visit expressvpn.com/Ben. Just a reminder,
VPNs are
we're doing some
bullshit,
bonus
by the
questions
way.
at the end with Jordan. The only way to get access to that part of the conversation is to become a member. Go over to dailywire.com, become a member. You'll have access to all of the full conversations with every one of our awesome guests. Jordan Peterson, thanks so much for joining the show.
Hi, Ben. It's really good to see you. Thanks for the
It is
invitation.
fantastic to see you.
Thank you.
It is, and congratulations on the brand new book. The book, of course, is Beyond Order: 12 More Rules for Life. It is moving and it is fulfilling. It is a wonderful, wonderful piece of work, and I think it's going to be inspirational to a lot of folks.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate that a lot.
So
Has anybody ever read any of Jordan Peterson's
let's
books?
talk about, before we get to the actual content of the books, I want to talk about
All right, I gotta pick myself up for my teammate right here. I'm letting him down. I'm letting him loose. I gotta hone in right now and bring us back down to 3-0.
some of the rules that are in there, which, again, I think there's a lot there that people are going to find inspirational and thought-provoking. Let's talk about the media's treatment of you. So the media's treatment of you for a long time, really since you sort of arose to international prominence, has been this mode of attack, whether it is the BBC suggesting that you're a vicious sexist or the New York Times suggesting that you want to force women into marriage, or whether now it is Ta-Nehisi Coates writing comics that portray you as Red Skull, Captain America's rival, the Nazi. He's a Nazi character. What do you make of these
Magic
attacks?
supervillain Nazi, because when Nazi isn't enough, when comparing you to Hitler isn't enough, there's always Red Skull. I think it's kind of hit a limit because the next step is Satan. Right. I mean, that's where you go after Red Skull. And what do I make of it?
Well-
Oh, thank you for your defense, by the way. Much appreciated.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean,
I should say, look, there have been people in the media who've been supportive of me from the beginning. I would say in Canada, for example, there's 4 or 5 people who I think are among Canada's top journalists who have been firm defenders of me right from the beginning. And so it isn't every single person in the mainstream media, although there's a
Oh, damn.
disproportionate number
No.
of people in the mainstream media who go after me compared, I think, to my popularity versus unpopularity in the general public.
Well, Peterson's comparison to Satan, they're going to call me Satan next. It really avoids all the nuance in the argument that he is similar to like Nazi ideology, because he's simply saying they're calling me Hitler, they're calling me Red Skull, they're calling me these people just because they are bad people, but no, we're calling you this because you do resemble them in some way. We're not just saying, oh, you're Satan, you're the devil because you're bad. You know, we're not saying you're bad for the sake of calling you bad. There are very pointed reasons of why we say that, but it does suck because the mainstream media, the way they talk about Jordan Peterson, literally just creates headlines and gives credence to his argument. You know, big tech's trying to shut me down, all that stuff, because they approach it in such a bad way, you know, when they criticize him.
And I've thought about it a lot. I'm not exactly sure what to make of it. I certainly wasn't sure what to make of the last Red Skull episode. It was absolutely shocking to me. It took me about 12
Even that, dude, like you gotta make that comparison in a much better way, or you're gonna help Peterson's case if you don't do it the right way.
hours to recover, because I couldn't believe it was actually real to begin with. It was so surreal. I found out about it on Twitter. Somebody just sent me the cartoon, and the first thing I thought was that it was a Photoshop mock-up, you know, just another meme. And then I looked into it a bit, and then I was really confused that this had occurred. It just seemed, especially when I found out who the author was, you know, so that was a double shock. And then I decided to, because I'm feeling better and I have my sense of humor back, at least to some degree, and so I decided I'd just play with it instead of any of the other possible options that
He
were
has
open
his
to me. And
he
that's
has
worked out
sense of humor
extremely
back.
well. We've raised about $150,000 for charity because of it, but it isn't disappearing. It doesn't seem to disappear. And every so often, somebody comes out of the woodwork and takes another swipe at me, and hoping that perhaps, I don't know, hoping that this will be the time that I finally get wiped out. And, you know, that's
Bro, stop being so dramatic. They weren't trying to cancel you with the Red Skull. It was an artistic expression. They weren't thinking, oh, if I make Jordan Peterson Red Skull, he's gonna be done for. Nobody's thinking that. Holy
it's
crap.
happened 3 or 4 times in major media outlets this year alone. The woman who interviewed me for GQ, she wrote a couple articles, one in the Atlantic Monthly, Helen Lewis, and she still seems to be quite disappointed
No, I don't think Peterson's wearing blush. I just think he's really pale still from his stint in rehab, so he needs to wear some makeup.
in the fact that I exist. And Decade can head in the
So yeah, he
Times
is wearing
in
blush.
the UK. She was quite the piece of
You
work.
are right.
And then this last episode with Ta-Nehisi Coates, I thought about it. I'll tell you what I think. You tell me what you think about this. You know, there are people like me, in some ways, like Steven Pinker, Jonathan Haidt, who are public intellectuals who are standing up against critical race theory and the
Critical race theory. Ugh, all the neo-Marxists from the top down, ivory towers of academia trying to manipulate us by telling us trans people are real.
worst of the leftist propaganda.
Leftist propaganda.
They're rationalists and atheists in the main, scientists.
Rationalists.
And I have one foot in that camp. But I also have a foot in the mythological, dramatic, religious camp. And
We got
you know,
that
Nellie
dub.
Bowles, who's one of the journalists who came after me, she's the one who wrote the Mea Culpa 3 or 4 months ago, pointing out that she used her position to destroy people's reputation just so she could attract attention to herself. Surprise, surprise. And, you know, she called me defender of the patriarchy, which was ironic in some sense, her use of that, but also an insult, at least from her perspective. But that's me. Both sides of it, the rationalist side, the Enlightenment side, and the religious side. And so have at her, boys. That's what I think. So I can't think of any other explanation, really.
No, I think that's right. I mean, when I saw what Coates had done in the Captain America comics, and I actually think that it does go to something root about our civilization at this point, because you talk a lot, Jordan, obviously, about mythology and the power of myth, and the most American form of myth at this point.
One thing I noticed that like Ben Shapiro does, or like far right people do, when they talk about like society, they don't say society very often. If you're on the left, you usually say like this is something happening in society, but he'll be like this is something happening in civilization.
Talk a lot, Jordan, obviously, about mythology and the power of myth. And the most American form of myth at this point in time are the comic
Comeback
books. Right?
baby.
Graphic novels are the form of American myth, particularly the Marvel Universe, which is the single biggest cinematic universe in movie history at this point.
Right.
And to take Captain America, who's the iconic American figure, turn him on his head so that he's opposing some of the stuff that you are saying. And what you are saying is reflective of Nazi propaganda. What it really does is it does place you in the position of Satan, except that the same people who very often are celebrating Satan in sort of his juxtaposition to God would never treat Satan that way. I think that you're worse than Satan because Satan is featured in Little Nas X videos as sort of something.
Oh my God, Little Nas X.
Right. There's a celebration of his rebellious spirit.
Yeah, your foot in him does differentiate you from a lot of the other people who the left has somewhat targeted, but has decided is not really worthwhile. That's why I think that the way that you were described in that comic book, for people who missed it, basically the implication was that Red Skull was driving people to join Hydra by issuing his 10 rules for order and talking about the greatness of civilization and how you should make your
everything Peterson does is to uphold fundamentalism. 100%, yeah.
room. And all of this stuff is driving many on the left up a wall, specifically because it's inspirational. The left knows that when it comes to driving the human heart, it's not enough to be a rationalist. You actually have to offer an inspirational program. And I think this is the great irony, is that folks like Coates, they do offer an inspirational program, but their inspirational program is an inspiration to tear down exactly the institutions of Western civilization you defend, which is why he has created this dichotomy.
Yeah, well, it's something.
Damn, Jordan Peterson. This is so crazy, this is so crazy they're comparing you to Nazis. By the way, you are defending Western civilization.
That everyone needs to take seriously across the political spectrum. I mean, it's quite clear that we need a story along with our politics. And that's because the human heart demands an adventure. And that's especially true if you're young. You know, the developmental psychologist Jean Piaget, who's a genius, a recognized genius, he has
Oh no, 2v1, my teammate quit.
The last stage of
Oh
development
no.
as in
I don't want to do a
adolescence as
2v1
the
right now.
Messianic stage. It isn't talked about much in developmental psychology.
All right,
literature.
boys,
I mean,
2v1 time.
Piaget was
My
actually
teammate quit.
trying to reconcile religion and science. That was his life's work. And he investigated the development of ethics empirically in an attempt to bridge the gap between the is and ought. And,
Shit.
and
No.
he was very, very serious about
Stop
that.
it.
drove
It's
his whole
unfair.
enterprise. In any case, he pointed out that there is a stage of development in late adolescence that he called the Messianic Stage, where people are looking
God,
for,
dude, it's not
I
fair.
suppose they're
2v1's not
catalyzing
fair.
their identity at the broadest possible level, which we would describe as religious. I don't care if you're religious or not. That's irrelevant to this discussion. At the highest level of generality, your identity, the best language to describe your identity happens to be religious, which is why we have a religious language, speaking purely from a psychological perspective. And what that means is that
Is my
there
teammate
has
back?
to be a call to adventure in order to keep people motivated to move forward in their life, both as individuals and
Oh, he's
as
playing against me.
members
It's
of
3v1.
society. And look, George Orwell really knew this.
I hate these
about the
people.
fascists, for example.
I'm reporting him, dude.
Orwell was
He's
a
getting reported. That's it.
profound anti-fascist. I mean, profound in the emotional sense and also
3v1.
in the
I hate
analytic
these
sense.
people in this game.
But he recognized very early and had the courage also to point out that the Nazis had conjured up a mythos that was unbelievably powerful, and that the rationalist West had nothing in its armament to contend with that. And fascism, in some sense, it's more difficult to mount a rational defense against than communism, because the fascists do use nonverbal appeal, and Hitler used fire and imagery and fashion and architecture and art and culture in the broadest sense to move his political platform forward. The leftists,
Hitler ran on a nationalistic platform. Like, Jordan Peterson would be defending everything Hitler was doing, dude. He would literally be agreeing with the conspiracy theories of, Jewish world order. Like, Jordan Peterson is that guy, just in a very approachable way that a lot of young men who don't have good role models latch onto.
especially in the US, are quite good at the dramatic end of
Whatever.
politics, and the
Literally everything Jordan Peterson does is rhetoric and an appeal to emotion and longing. you know, a longing for your place in society, and you don't want society to change. Society's changing too fast, and you're getting scared. That's his entire appeal.
Antifa riots, that sort of thing, the Black Lives Matter protests. They're appealing to young people. And you can imagine.
No, he's saying that he's comparing fascism to like BLM. Like, yeah, okay. Yeah. Yep. Cool. What he's describing are social movements, but there are different kinds of social movements, of course. But it's really funny how he's trying to draw this back to BLM.
I always remember, I saw this kid in Montreal once. He was about 17, and he was dressed in punk clothes. He's a big kid, 6'5", like a big, powerful kid. And he was standing on the corner of this outdoor shopping mall with 2 pink shopping bags in his hand. And he looked like a fool. And it was partly because he felt like a fool, because there he was, this like monster standing there with these pink shopping bags.
No, he isn't defending Nazis. He's saying BLM are the
And
Nazis.
I looked at him and I thought, geez, you know, if you went and offered him an overseas adventure, a warlike overseas adventure, he'd drop those damn bags and he'd be gone in a second. And no wonder. And so it's incumbent on us to realize that that call to adventure is necessary, and that it has to be built in some manner into our political thinking. And the left is very, very good at that. They're much better, the radical left. They're much better than the left.
The radical
centrists,
left.
and they're much better than the centrist right.
He's trying to scare people.
Now, Trump managed that to
basically.
some degree with his populism, but not to the same degree as the intellectuals, the dramatic intellectuals on the left.
The
I think
dramatic
that this
intellectuals on the
points
left.
to, you know, some serious problems at the heart of
He tries to position himself and present himself as an anti-authoritarian when in reality he supports authoritarian hierarchies. That's his whole thing. Like, oh, I hate these radical sides, but he is a radical side. He just doesn't use the same fiery rhetoric, but he moves people. He can move people in that direction, in a more implicit, in a more like what's it called? Sneaky way.
of sort of classical liberalism, and I consider myself
Classical
a
liberalism.
conservative socially and a classical liberal when it comes to the role of government. But it does point to some real problems with
Classical
the heart
liberal,
of
bro.
classical liberalism and the rationalist enlightenment side of the argument, that there is no greater appeal to the human heart other than
Marxists and Nazis are polar opposites. You can say that left and right authoritarians exist, but those people are not in the same camp. The first thing the Nazis did was kill socialists and Marxists and Democrats. That's the first thing they did. They are not the same.
sort of what works in pragmatism. And there has to be something on the other end of that. I want to ask you about that in just 1 second, Jordan. First, let's talk about your privacy on the internet. Well, folks, we know that big tech is not a big
If you want to say the people on the left that support, or the people that think they're on the left that support like China, if you want to say they're authoritarians, sure.
fan of people on the right side of the aisle. Everybody should have the right to express themselves freely, but the big tech monopoly, instead they've opted for silencing tactics and censorship. Well, one way that I fight back against big tech control, I use ExpressVPN. Have you ever wondered how free to access
What kind of a little kid goes on Rocket League? Freaking griefs me. Takes the L, stays the entire. I hate these people.
Online, what's more, what I like most is how easy it is to use and wired. You need to on your computer. Revoke big VPNs are free. Speaking a moment ago about the sort of lack of meaning that people are looking for, particularly young men, and it really is a big thing that young men seem to have lost meaning. Postmodernism killed the scientific rationalist world, and the postmodernists have decided to substitute for that a certain utopian vision of the remolding of American society in terms of what they call equity, but really amounts to tribal dynamics. And you see this over and over, the radical left pushing its own version of utopianism. Classical liberals have been wrong-footed, I think, by the need for something more fulfilling, which is why classical liberalism always relied on an unspoken assumption that you were going to find meaning in your family, you were going to find meaning in religious community, you were going to find meaning in bettering your social life outside of government. But when that unspoken understanding just dissipated, when religion started to fall apart, all that was left was, well, let's just be rational with one another. There's not much inspiring there. And I think that's why you see that across the board, a drive toward irrationalism, a certain level of romanticism dominating.
Ben Shapiro's entire platform, the only reason he grew is because he went on rants about like why we should be misgendering trans people and why BLM are terrorists and why like Little Nas X is going to bring the fall of Western civilization. That's literally how he got his rise, is emotional appeals. He doesn't believe in like classical liberalism. His economic platform is flimsy too. He doesn't have any actual core principles on what he wants to see happen. He just wants to be against. He's a contrarian. That's all he freaking does. But he's talking here as if he has some type of like higher guiding order.
The society to the point where irrationalism is much more prized than rationalism. If you make a rational point, if you cite data, very often this is now
There is no leader of BLM. There's no leader of BLM. There is no. If a random person on the sidewalk says they support BLM, they do not support some type of BLM mercenary force. That's not how that works. There is no BLM leader. Can I please get the CEO of BLM on the phone, please?
considered not only impolitic but damaging and dangerous.
The other thing that ideology does, and the radical leftists are also
The
very
radical
good at
left,
this, is
ugh.
that
Radical.
it
Radical,
provides you
bro.
with a convenient locale for the existence of evil. And so, if you reflexively identify the patriarchy with evil, well, first of all, that's a powerful idea. It independent of its broad merit. It's true. Now, it's not the only truth, and it's not the complete truth, but it's true. The reason it's true is because every hierarchical system tends to degenerate in the direction of power. And all hierarchical systems are less than they could be. And that's partly because of the possibility that power and deceit will corrupt them, but also partly because we're willfully blind and deceitful in our own personal lives. And so when you tell young people that the cause of the trouble they see around them in the world, and maybe even the disquiet in their own heart, is
And they have this idea that young people are told what the problems are. It's basically every old person that says, wow, you went to college and got indoctrinated into their liberal education. That's literally his entire thing. People got told this is what the problems are. And I don't hear 90% of people, if I talk to them, they aren't crazy like patriarchy is super evil. We have to bring down the patriarchy. People like that don't really exist on that grand of a scale, but they take the fringes of what's on the left. They say everyone on the left believes whatever the fringes believe, and then they call all of them neo-Marxists or whatever. And they say they want to bring an end to Western civilization and everything that makes life good in America.
the malevolent inadequacy of their society, that rings true. And they don't hear the rest of the story, and it's the rest of the story that I've been trying to tell. They don't hear the story that, yeah, don't forget about the evil and corruption that exists in your own heart. And don't forget about the fact that nature, this wondrous goddess as portrayed by the anti-human environmentalists, and by that I don't mean all
Anti-human
by the way,
environmentalists?
that wonderful goddess nature is also trying to make you ill and kill you at all times. And so, but the story that corruption exists in hierarchical structure, and that's a consequence of malevolence, the malevolent use of power and deceit, that's true. So it's very motivating, especially if you're young and you're looking for an adventure. Now, it's also too convenient, which is one of its tremendous dangers, because unless you're taught to look within and identify the malevolence there.
I'm going to make my own organization called America so I can be the leader of America. So you, whenever you talk about America, you're talking about me, baby. That's how you sound saying that there's a BLM leader.
As the primary moral obligation, then you now have an excuse and a moral justification to take out all of your negative emotion, your hostility, your resentment, everything about you that's unexamined on the demonic enemy. And of course, the demonic enemy, yeah, with extraordinary rapidity, as we've seen over and over and over. So it's up to the centrists on both sides to deal with this. I've been talking to a lot of the optimist rationalist types on my podcast, Matt Ridley and Bjorn Lomborg and Haidt and Pinker, more distantly, but more recently,
Rocket League's a good game.
Ridley and
Loser.
Marian Tupy, who's written a lovely book on human progress, 10 things everyone needs to know.
My teammate sucks.
Human progress. It's something like that, huh? Anyways, one of the things we discussed consistently was the difficulty in promoting the message that all three of these men are very aware of, which is that from a material perspective, in terms of absolute privation worldwide, humanity is way better off on virtually every dimension you could possibly measure than ever. And most of that improvement has occurred in the last 40 years, and it's been revolutionary in its speed. And no one knows this. And so it's very important to try to think through why that is. Like, that's such a positive message. Now, I talked to Russell Brand about this, and
As time went on, we moved further and further away from these fundamentalist ideas, though. They can't give credit to those ideas because the more those ideas decline, like religion and all that stuff, the more, like, literally, the past 40 years has shown the biggest shift away from religion in history. It has shown the biggest shift away from the traditional family in history, and this is when this progress has happened. So I feel like he's kind of defeating his own point, but of course he's going to accredit all of the progress to the wrong things. You know, he's going to literally say the opposite of the truth here.
I'm bringing him up for a reason. He's a lefty by temperament and by heart. And
Who do you bring up?
about this, and I'm bringing him up for a reason. He's a
Who? Who?
to try to think through why that is. Like, that's such a positive message. Now, I talked to Russell Brand about
Russell
this. And I'm
Brand.
bringing
He's
him up
not a
for reason.
lefty.
He's
a
a lefty
lib.
by temperament and by heart. And
He's a center-rightist.
his first objection, but he's very thoughtful and quick. His first objection, I pointed out all this data showing that by every possible objective measure, everything is way better than it was certainly 100 years ago, but certainly even 20 years ago, even on the environmental front in the main. And he said, well, what about disparity of distribution? So there's the problem of absolute level of wealth, let's say. That's improving. But there is still tremendous disparity. And of course, that is fair enough. You could even point out that the role of the left is to provide a conscientious voice for that's constantly attending to the fact of continuing disparity, regardless of absolute level of wealth. And fair enough, but
If you consider yourself anti-authoritarian, then wealth disparity needs to be on your list of main issues. Wealth disparity is one thing that makes people lose freedom, and it makes power. It doesn't matter about money. It doesn't matter about who can buy cars. It means power is collected in the hands of a few. If you're anti-authoritarian, you cannot say wealth disparity is okay.
But having said all that, it's a great mystery that incremental optimism is not sufficiently motivating. And you can't just wish human nature is going to change. It's not going to change. We got to tell a better story. And I also think that's why I'm a target.
Oh, dude.
I think is because I am actually trying to tell a better story, and I'm actually
Because you're a
having some
useful
success
idiot.
with it.
So I totally agree with that. And that
No, you
really
don't.
does bring us to the book, because one of the things that folks should know about all of your books is that they are
I'm
very
bad. I
intimate,
quit.
very personal. You talk about yourself, but you also speak in a way that most writers do not. You use second person pronouns. I mean, you speak directly to the reader. You say, you feel this way, you think this way. And a lot of people read
He's
that.
telling people how to feel because all of his followers are like lost. It's scary. It's a cult-like mentality. The same with Joe Rogan and Elon Musk. The way they treat their fan bases, the way people adore them, is like a cult. It's as if all these people literally did not grow up with any role models, and now they're being taught how to live life through the lens of freaking Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan. Because they all like the same. If you like Joe Rogan, you probably like Peterson. If you like Peterson, you probably like Musk. It's like the big the Holy Trinity or nuclear triad. I don't know. Explosive,
I say, I do think that way. This is a person who's speaking directly to me in a way that mainstream political books very often do not. They consider me sort of a widget.
If she was making money off of BLM, that makes me even more confident she is not really involved in BLM. The BLM organizations around the world that are meant for purely organizing and activism have nothing to do with that main whatever that organization is, that main whatever BLM thing.
In whatever ideology they're pushing, or they're considering the value of systems or not systems, but you sort of end around that. And I think that in many ways, that's what members of the left find so threatening, is because if you're a member of the left and you believe that all individuals are essentially just the outgrowths of institutions, and therefore that all change by individuals is going to be insufficient, and that it must be societal change that creates individual change.
No, oh my God, dude. we talk about how individuals work within a system, but we also note how systems affect individuals, and individual outcomes are going to be affected by systems. Ben Shapiro literally leaves zero room for class analysis or any type of social analysis. He doesn't believe systems affect anybody. His literal idea to fix poverty is to tell people to work harder. That's such a dumb anti-intellectual idea, dude. Like the way he talks is so anti everything good. He's wrong about literally everything. And he talks about the other side as if he's projecting his own ideological failures onto the other side. Thank you so much for $10, Cocked Rooster. He thinks that because religion used to be a fundamental part of Western civilization, that anything the West does follows from religion, regardless of time passing and cultural changes. I think religion did give some good things in general, but
a threat because you're telling people, well, the systems can certainly get better, but the main threat to you is you. And that is a deeply threatening message to people. And if people find fulfillment in that message, then the left really does have a problem, because if people start improving their lives within the
because if people think everything comes down to the individual level, nothing will ever get better, because life isn't that simple. Like, you got to get exterior help sometimes. You got to be willing to go to actual therapy. You got to be willing to fix your circumstances, because that all goes into who you are as an individual. If you pretend that a poor person can be just as successful as a rich person, I mean, somebody that starts poor is going to be just as successful as somebody that starts rich. That poor person is going to go crazy trying to meet up to those, or trying to meet those expectations. And that rich person isn't going to have to try at all, and they're going to be successful by default. There are big things that affect people's lives through depression, anxiety, economic anxiety, relationships with other people. The chances you get married is a lot higher if you have more money. Can you provide for your kids? Can your kids go to a good school system? All this stuff matters a lot. Of course, personal responsibility doesn't need to be, shouldn't be lost in that equation or whatever. But I would argue that Ben Shapiro doesn't care about either of those things. He doesn't care about systemic issues or individual issues. He just cares about making sure people don't follow whatever the left is saying. He doesn't care about actual, honest, intellectual conversations.
the system and not blaming the system for their problems, and instead recognizing that they can improve their lives. That's what members of the left hate most of all. You talk about in the book, Jordan, the fact that people are constantly coming up to you and they're saying things like, I was leading a dissolute life. I read your book. I started taking your advice, and I've turned it around, and now I'm doing much better in life. And I'm blessed to have much the same experience from a lot of people who listen to the show. People who have been homeless, who now have graduated Harvard Law School. People who were single moms and then decided to take a college course and figure out their lives. People who've made mistakes and turned their mistakes around. And to me, those are inspirational stories. I think that because those inspirational stories exist, that I think is why people find you to be such a threat. It's because so many people are inspired by the stuff that you say and change their life individually without putting all of their ire and focus on a system that the left is mainly focused on.
Jordan Peterson has anecdotes about a couple people being successful.
On tearing down.
I defy anyone to go read 10,000 comments on my YouTube channels and not come away with a much better, with a much refreshed view of human nature. The comments are, in the main, unbelievably positive. And not
Buds, there is no BLM. There are millions, there are thousands of BLM organizations. None of them actually matter. The overall movement matters. That's all people care about. The BLM organization is not a thing. You are being lied to by propaganda.
Naive sense. They're
Please.
positive in a thoughtful sense and in a communal sense, because the people who are making comments on the lectures are also commenting on each other. And there's ideological babble on both sides. I would say that's probably 5% of the comments. And generally, I believe they're written by people who didn't actually watch the lecture, because they're often out of context. But in any case, 95% of the comments are thoughtful, but also extremely positive, which is very rare in a social media comment landscape, which tends to be very, very toxic. And so I think that's absolutely great. And it certainly has that impact on me when I read it. But
oh yeah, all the people that listen to Joe Biden's speech, oh my God, you have to realize most of the country does not care at all about actual policies. People tell me I'm wrong about this, but no, they don't care about actual policies. You need to get your voters out to vote. You got to win voters in the middle. You got to appeal to social categories. Joe Biden literally said, I want to make jobs in rural America. I want to make jobs that do not require a high school degree or that do not require a college degree. No Republicans actually care about that. Like, holy crap, dude. They care more about being anti-liberal. They care more about owning Democrats than they care about actually helping their areas survive. I swear to God.
Then here's something else that I've observed in the media
It's so
attacks
annoying.
that have been directed towards me. They're not just directed towards me. First they're directed.
It's not even socialism. Joe Biden's economic platform is literally a system meant to maintain capitalism. His system, his like economic plan is literally capitalism saver. It's market saver 101. It's making the system more susceptible to like revolution. It's making sure no radicals rise up too powerful to ruin capitalism. Joe Biden is more of a capitalist than Donald Trump is, but he's not a dumbass. That's the difference. He's like a Christian Democrat. He wants a big welfare state. He wants big infrastructure programs. He doesn't care about deficit spending at all. Like, that's a big freaking that's not socialism. Holy crap. He wants to contract private companies for his infrastructure plan. People just don't know what any of this freaking means.
Who they think I am. So that's kind of interesting to begin with. But more than directed to me, and more perniciously, is that they're directed to those who are hypothetically following me. Now, I don't regard myself as someone with followers. I regard myself.
Yeah, frickin' Joe Biden said more in that speech than Trump said in his entire career about helping Pennsylvania. People here don't care. I wish they did. Maybe after 4 years, maybe after something actually happens, they'll care. But it does matter how much you're actually on like Facebook and stuff too. If you're on Facebook more, you're not going to care that much. But hopefully, as these programs roll out, hopefully they come out in a good way, not too stripped down by like Joe Manchin. Hopefully, when this does happen, people start to realize Joe Biden is a lot better for areas like mine than Trump.
As someone with viewers, listeners, and readers, and that's different. But in any case, my typical follower, so goes the story, is a disaffected, angry, young white male.
It is.
And for a while, I, in some sense, pushed back against that and said, well, my audience is about 70% male, but YouTube skews male, so that's perhaps part of the reason. And I see no evidence that it's particularly limited racially or ethnically, especially when I see my lecture crowds and when I meet people on the street. But
right away.
But then I started to realize that that was the wrong response.
Let me in. Let me in. Let me. I'm gonna die. No, let me in. Okay.
Disturb you so much that there's a group of people who, by your own admission, are disaffected and angry and alienated and young, and I'm helping them.
Damn.
And why is that exactly a problem? What is it that I'm supposed to be doing with them? Just out of curiosity. What do you think if you had your druthers? Would I ignore them? Would no one talk to them? Is that actually what you want? Well, the answer seems quite clear that that is exactly what's wanted. That's what's held forth, because there's this implicit assumption in all of this critique that in my very active aid, I'm doing something immoral enough to be parodied, let's say, as Red Skull.
What level of narcissism is it when you're like, I need to save these people? How can I let them down? They are relying on me. They need a leader. I shall be that man. I shall be the one to teach them the way. They are from fatherless households. I will be their lord. I will bring them back to the fundamental values of Western civilization. What level of narcissism is that?
So just what the hell's going on here? It's like, why is that now?
The co-founder of BLM doesn't matter, buds. Holy crap. God, you're making me mad.
Fodder for parody.
You're a troll. I know you're a troll. Guaranteed.
Precisely. I mean, do you debate the fact that I'm helping? Well, you go read the comments yourself and see what you think. And so then,
Cloud, I care more about the infrastructure plan than I do $15 an hour. The infrastructure plan is much more important than $15 an hour, in my opinion. The median wage is already rising across the country. Like in a lot of the areas where we need 15, the median wage is already going up at a rate that's going to be comparable to a minimum wage increase. That'd be incremental anyway, if it actually got done. Like, I'd rather the infrastructure plan. I'd rather concrete jobs, union jobs, good jobs that can't be, like Biden said, that can't be outsourced or whatever. I care about that more. I care about the universal pre-K. I care about the community college being free. Yeah, I care about there being local jobs programs. I care about the child tax credit being official until 2025. There's a lot of other things to worry about than $15 an hour. That's probably at the bottom of my worries right now, to be honest.
And then I thought about that a bunch too. I thought, well, what is it with men, the men that I'm speaking?
Because if all this other stuff does work, then we'll get 15. But 15 is a lost fight right now. It'll be brought up again, but we got to get this other stuff done first to get the necessary political power. I mean, I still feel really bad about 2022, so I don't think we're going to get anything after that. So I want to get some shit done now. I don't know.
Two, let's say.
The Senate is
Why
so
are they
hard to win.
responding positively? Why did they come to my lectures, the
Oh,
biblical
I'm
lectures,
stuck.
which is very surprising, right? Because what the hell are
Oh,
men doing at a
no.
biblical lecture, especially young men, especially when they could go do anything else and they have to pay for it? It's like, what are they doing coming to this lecture? Well, if the patriarchy is an evil tyranny, then the appropriate attitude towards any male ambition is to not treat it as ambition, but to treat
All that stuff, the family plan and the infrastructure plan, that can all be done through budget reconciliation, because it all has to do with spending. It's a big spending program. $15 an hour can't be done because, and Biden did the $15 an hour for every federal worker already, but $15 an hour can't be done through budget reconciliation. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with spending, and there's not enough consensus in the party to get it done through any other means. So,
treat it as nascent drive to tyrannical power.
all right, I'm
Which
gonna
is
die.
certainly what Foucault would recommend, for example, or Derrida, because it's all power. And so if you see some young man trying to stand up and better himself in any dimension, you're not going to trust that. You're going to identify that as the manifestation of tyrannical power. And clearly, if the patriarchy is a malevolent tyrant, then any sign of the desire to contribute it to it should be at minimum not encouraged. But more subtly,
Why is Biden talking about it? Because it still makes sense politically to talk about it. I don't know. Doesn't mean it's going to get done. If you want to put pressure on politicians, you say it. You say that. If anything, that shows how much pull progressives actually do have. I'm surprised that he made such a big point of saying, you know something you should send them on disc. Huh. $15 an hour, get it done. I was
criticized and
surprised.
discouraged at every possible opportunity. And that's our culture.
So in a second, I want to get to a lot of the thoughts here that we've been talking about are embedded in some of the rules that you talk about in your book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, which of course is breaking all sales.
Think about that title too. Rules for Life. Those titles are always snake oil, dude. There's a couple other ones. I actually bought one similar to that. It was called 48 Laws of Power. And the people that love these books are the entrepreneur types that are usually born rich, but they love these books that like give them the magical code. These people also tend to like pickup artist books, like How to Pick Up Girls, 5 Easy Steps to Getting the Girl of Your Dreams. If you try hard and you cut your hair the right way, you can manifest your future, your destiny. You can do anything you want to do if you try harder and follow these steps.
Sales records as per your usual.
And I
This is
think
the way that Jordan's
I think
books
there's a
sell at
place
this
for
point.
that.
We'll get to that in just one second. First, let's talk about your sleep quality. You know, it's pretty obvious when I don't get a good night's rest. I mean, everybody can see it, but here's the thing. It's free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but you absolutely will. We took the Helix sleep quiz, my wife and I. We got a mattress made just for us, and it is just amazing. It's a great mattress. Helix is offering up to $200 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners at helixsleep.com/Ben. That's helixsleep.com/Ben. Alrighty, Jordan, so I want to jump into some of the rules that you talk about in the book Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life, because, again, there's a lot of depth here and a lot of nuance that I think.
Well, if you can really convince somebody like, hey, you got to do this. You got to just get it done. You got to put your head down and grind, and you will succeed at this one thing. There are places in which that is true. There are some places in which that kind of, oh, I'm so bad. No, I'm going to get killed now. No, I'm so bad. Okay, he's bad. Oh, shit, there's another guy. Ah, no. Shit.
I think that a lot of people want to deny.
I'm breaking my microphone. I'm so upset.
you, which is usually the way this thing sort of goes, is that if you have a lot of people who follow what you do and you have a general worldview opposed to that of many in the media, then you are robbed of all nuance and everything turns immediately into you're a right-wing patriarchal fascist. That's just what it boils down to. It's always you're evil, stupid, or incompetent. Those are the three slurs that are
Yes.
usually tossed
All
out there.
three.
Yes, who happens somewhat oddly to take things like Harry Potter seriously. So it's another reason that it's not that easy to pigeonhole me. It's like, okay, I'm all those things, but now I'm taking pop culture seriously. I'm thinking that when people are reading Harry Potter, they're not just fools, that this isn't trivial. Just like the Marvel universe isn't trivial. People wouldn't be spending billions of dollars on it if it was trivial. They wouldn't be reading, half a dozen 600-page books when they're 10 years old, which is what happened with Harry Potter if it was trivial. And so the other thing that happens is the mainstream critics of the type we've been describing just wave their hands about that and say, I'm wandering off into some intellectually contemptible mystical landscape. But that's not the case at all. I'm taking this very, very seriously. And when something happens like the Harry Potter phenomenon or the Captain Marvel universe phenomena, anyone with any sense who's a sociological or psychological observer is going to try to get to the bottom of that. And so I'm doing that with the books. But like I said, the consequence of that is it's just hand waving.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's part and parcel of an entire gaslighting effort by the media to radically shift culture. And then when you note that culture is radically shifted, then they say, how dare you notice that culture is radically shifting? Or if you point out that something is quite popular and may have a deeper meaning, they know that. That's why they're making it. That's why they're monetizing it. But the moment you point it out, they say, how dare you even pay attention to the fact that this is an important thing in culture? This just shows that you're silly. It's all, honestly, a childish gaslighting game. But I want to get to some of the rules in the book. The first rule that you talk about, Jordan, is not to carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievement. And here, this is really a post-partisan message. It's a recognition that conservatives' respect for tradition, respect for the past, is really a respect for institutions that have been built up over the course of thousands of years in conjunction with an increasingly good understanding of human nature. And that has to be balanced with a recognition that we can't get so tied up in these rules that it becomes impossible to extricate ourselves from them. We can't fossilize these rules and turn them into something that is unchangeable in any way. That in essence, we should be cautious about changing the rules of society. They should be changeable, so we shouldn't obliterate them. But we also you have to know the rules of the game before you can change the rules of the game. If you're playing Calvin ball in Calvin and Hobbes, and the rules of the game change every second, that's not a game anymore. That's just an exercise of power. But you also have to recognize that sometimes the rules do have to change. How do you balance those two things?
Well, I think the first thing you do is vow to tell the truth so that you don't foul yourself up. And then I think you pay attention to what manifests itself to you as meaningful. Because I think that meaning, I literally think, and I think this empirically as well as spiritually, let's say, I believe that the instinct of meaning signifies the optimal information processing function of the nervous system. So when you're balanced properly between order and novelty, or order and chaos, that manifests itself to you as deep engagement. And that's a signal. And it's not merely cognitive, it's way deeper than that. It's a signal that you're in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time. And everyone wants that. And everyone wants that all the time. Like images of paradise are representations of that state of being. So it's there for you. But there are preconditions. And one of the preconditions is that you strive to do the best, to aim at the best. And that has to be your fundamental ethos. And it's a decision that despite all of the calamities of being, that your primary ethical obligation is to work for the betterment of yourself and others. And that's
He says a lot of really simple concepts in a really wordy way. So people think he's saying something really profound. So when they sort of take in what he's saying, they place it at a level of higher value because he's somebody they trust. Even if what he's saying is basically, follow my self-help book or whatever. He does it in such a way that's really manipulative. It makes people really get attached to what he's saying. And he also does that whole spiel with the anti-SJW stuff, where he's like, trans people aren't real, feminism sucks, any change of culture is bad, Western civilization needs to be upheld, Marxists are controlling our academics, all that stuff too. So he plays into a lot of things that really attract very vulnerable people, and that's why a lot of online neo-Nazis like him, because he's really good at that job. Really cool, dude. Really cool.
It's a very complex decision because there's so much of you that's twisted and turned against existence itself because of its suffering and complexity. It's very hard to get your head straight about that. And so you get warped and twisted by resentment and deceit and temptations of various sorts. So that has to be straightened out so that you are aiming in the right direction. And once you manage that, or perhaps in conjunction with that, you have to watch what you say. You have to say what you believe to be true, not because you're trying to accomplish something specific with what you're saying, but because you're attempting to represent what's happening in front of you as accurately as you possibly can and let go of the consequences. And then you search for you search for the engagement that produces. And this is one of the things I love about long form podcasts, is that when a conversation takes off properly and it's dynamic and unscripted, both of the participants are striving to keep that sense of engagement constantly at play. And if they do that, then the conversation is engaging and deep and gets as deep as the people involved can manage. And they'll pull the entire audience along for the ride. And everyone is thrilled about that. That's logos. That's the manifestation of logos. And it's deeply meaningful. There's nothing more meaningful than that. And that's a sign that you've got that balance right. You want to be there all the time. That's the goal, is to be there all the time. Of course, that's a lofty goal and very difficult to attain, but that's the end game.
So, Jordan, in a second, I want to ask you, how do people aim for the best, and how do we define the best such that we don't fall into sort of a radical subjectivism where we all define the best for ourselves and the best can mean anything we want it to mean? And ask you about that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about, for just 1 second, the nature of the employees at your company. So let's say you own a company and you need the best people working for you. It can be very difficult to find.
Jordan Peterson owns over 200 socialist realist artworks, mostly from Soviet Ukraine.
The best people to work for you quickly and efficiently. If you're a business owner who's hiring, you could post your .com/matching technology employers who post on ZipRecruiter.
He has a lot of socialist imagery, and he has a lot of paintings of young revolutionaries fearlessly accepting their fate as they are lined up for execution by a white army soldier. He has another wall in his office that has a massive painting of Lenin's 1917 speech in St. Petersburg, proclaiming the transfer of power to the Soviets. There are Soviet national heroes in his office. Very interesting.
A quality candidate within the very first day. It's no wonder. We heard daily before, once again, ZipRecruiter subjectivism. There's such a thing as an objective best that we're all. This is just whatever I feel like is the best for me, or the best for the universe, but in my own particular viewpoint. Is there such a thing as an objective best that we're all searching for?
There's a transpersonal best. I don't know if it's objective. I think we need a third category, which is something like transpersonal subjective. So it's the same across people, but it still manifests itself in the subjective domain. There's a technical problem with being selfish, because you might say, well, it's myself against others, and I could just do what was good for me. There's a technical problem with that, which I outline in both books, but in particular in Beyond Order. I said, well, if it's, let's say you're only acting in accordance with what's good for you. Well, which you do you mean exactly?
Peterson's unlikely collection of Soviet art has become part of his own personal mythology, routinely preferred as evidence of his profound ethical commitment to an understanding, his commitment to understanding the forces of evil in the world. He wants to have paintings around because he was obsessed with totalitarianism and the human capacity for atrocity. Living with these paintings remind him of the subjugation of art to ideology and the horrors of the USSR. Yeah, so he's really, really, really paranoid from the Cold War era. It's really interesting how what he says now really is grown from that paranoia.
Do you mean you in the next 5 minutes, or the next 10 minutes, or the next day, or the next week, or month, or year, or 5 years, etc.? You get the picture. There's the you that extends at multiple levels of temporal resolution. And that's a group. That you, I mean, you're an old person. Not yet, but you will be. And so you could say that if you were enlightened selfish, you'd act in a manner now that is best for your 80-year-old self. And so if you take yourself seriously as an entity that exists collectively across time, then you're faced with the problem of the collective instantly, even if you're highly selfish. So I don't think that there is a selfishness that's logically juxtaposed against the interest of the collective. And I do think that there are emergent ethics that are inevitable. I think you see them cross species, even to some degree. There are playable and non-playable games. That's a good way of looking at it, because a game is an iterated series of interactions. And out of iterated series of interactions, ethics emerges. And it emerges with a structure. And we recognize the structure. One way we recognize it, I believe, and this is also assuming that your eyes are open and you're not lying to yourself to too great a degree, you'll be struck with admiration for certain people. That grips you. Well, why? Well, that's the manifestation of the instinct to imitate. It grips you with admiration. It's the same sense of meaning. And it's because that person is doing something that signals to you the place that you should advance to. And our cognitive architecture is predicated on imitation to a degree that's almost impossible to overstate. And that sense of awe, which is an elevation of the sense of meaning, is manifested when the admirable makes itself present. And that's not really cognitive. It's not something you think through. It's something that grabs you. Now, you can make it explicit. You can decompose it. You can take it apart. The idea of worship, when the idea of worship is taken seriously, it's the injunction to imitate. It's to find the highest thing you can possibly find to admire, and then to imitate that. And that grip that's the worship. That's the awe. And that's an instinct, and it's related to the fact that we live in social hierarchies and that we admire those who have progressed in the hierarchy in the direction of the goals that we are striving to attain. It's all built unbelievably deeply into our biology, to a degree that hasn't been appreciated yet or taken sufficiently seriously. That religious instinct is real. It's real. It's more real than anything else.
So, Jordan, one of the things that you talk about, and this is what so many people have, I think, honed in on, and I think a lot of people find it threatening, is the fact that one of your main messages in all of this is that the way that you're going to find meaning and the people who you're going to want to imitate are the people who take on the most responsibility. And in a society that focuses a lot on rights and very, very little on duties, that is a super countercultural message. And the fact that it's resonating with young people has to scare the living hell out of a lot of people, because the simple fact is that so much of our society is predicated on the idea that it is actually, in some ways, antisocial to take on responsibility.
Well, a lot of this is the Ayn Rand stuff, right? Of like, selfishness is good. So they're saying it in a more, in a less outwardly way.
Responsibility defeats the purpose of the
Moral
infrastructure that we've
objectivism,
created to
right?
relieve you of the responsibility. So if you say, no, I don't want your help, I feel that your help is enervating me, and my job in life is to shy away from that supposedly helping hand that actually is crippling my ability to care for myself and my family, that scares a lot of folks who are invested in these systems. But you really preach responsibility, and I think that's right. I mean, I can't think of a single person that I admire who is a person who shirks. In fact, I find it hard to believe that there's anybody who people admire whose main goal in life is to shirk responsibility and engage in personal pleasure. As much as people may talk about that, it's just not something people naturally admire.
You can see that admiration sometimes. So you can think about the film Rebel Without a Cause, for example. There's the romantic rebel who shirks duty but the real reason is he's standing up for higher responsibility and refusing like blind pathological conformity. And so you can get around the responsibility problem that way and admire, creative rebellion, something like that. But those few exceptions apart, I ask my readers just to think for themselves about that. It's like, well, who do you admire? And when do you admire yourself? When do you have some self-respect? And when does your conscience bother you? Do you have self-respect when you're shouldering your responsibilities or when you're abdicating them? You might say, well, I don't have any responsibilities. It's like, well, do you have any goals? Well, I don't have any goals. Well, then you don't have a life. It's like, you can't even act. You have to have goals. That just doesn't work. That isn't a statement that works in the world. If you have goals, you have responsibility. The responsibility is to progress towards the goals. You can even change the goals if you want, but you can't get rid of the fact that you have a responsibility to move towards your goals. And you can say, well, I'll just dispense with goals. It's like, well, unless you're like the Buddha, good luck with that. And even in the Buddha's case, I mean, he had nirvana at his fingertips, but rejected it to go back to redeem the world. So the only instance we know of, essentially, mythologically or otherwise, where there was a detachment from goals and nirvana attained as a consequence, the consequence of that still was the adoption of responsibility, the rejection of nirvana as a solitary pursuit. So, and then you think about your own life and the life of your parents. Well, where do you find your meaning? Well, in your intimate relationship. Is there responsibility there? Well, there is if it's a relationship that's based on trust and love and fidelity. Your children, your parents, people who depend on you, you're not going to have that? Well, that's a responsibility. And wouldn't it be something if that's where the meaning was? Well, it is. And this is my experience. I've really been thinking about this lately, about where the deepest meaning is. I was talking to this guy, Chris Williamson, a while back, and he's got this new podcast in the UK. And I was really struck when he interviewed me because he spoke, when he asked me questions, he had no speech errors, no ums, likes, no pauses in attention, nothing. And I asked him about that, and he said he had been practicing being precise in his speech for 6 years and had really mastered that. But in any case, before he started his podcast, which is called Modern Wisdom, he was a successful young man in the sort of quasi-celebrity way that the culture might offer as a icon.
Yeah, the idea that people simply stopped searching for goals and that's why things aren't working out anymore is wrong. If you have a good system, people typically want to work hard. It's not like they just don't want to. That's not true. But the issue is now, if there's no incentive to work hard, why would people work hard? Why would you work hard if you're just gonna barely get by? Why would you want to work hard if there's no chance to move up the ladder? You can't just tell people to work hard. You have to show them what the end goal is. Like, why would you work hard if there's nowhere you can get? Like, oh yeah, work hard so work hard so your boss can literally take every fruit of your labor and give you pocket change at the end of the day. Like, okay, cool. You can't buy a house because housing prices are too high, so you have to rent for way too much money. It's wild.
On for admiration. He worked in nightlife, and he's an attractive guy, and he had money, and he had women, and he had material success. And good for him, as far as I'm concerned. That's a lot better than failure. But he started to pursue something that was deeper, and the podcast came out of that, and he started attending to what he was saying. I talked to him about the deep sense of satisfaction, meaning that I have when people tell me that they've done something positive in their life and that I had some influence on that, or something I said had some influence on that. It's overwhelmingly significant. And he said he had exactly the same experience. It's like, what if it was the case? All cynicism defeated with this proposition that there isn't anything that would actually make you feel more engaged in your life than taking the opportunity to take the best in someone else and encourage that development. What if that is what we're actually like? I think that is what we're like. I believe that. And I see it. I see it happening all over. And so that's not power, eh? That's, if our hierarchies are actually based on that, most fundamentally.
No, because we say, "Hey guys, can we please fix the system so it's easier?" Can we please fix the system so it's easier to be successful when you do work hard? Like, if we work hard, we want to be rewarded for it. If we say that, they're gonna say, "Oh wow, these liberals don't want to work at all." Oh, wow, I told you so.
And the best people I've seen who are very successful in their hierarchies are people who take their mentoring, for example, not only with dead seriousness, but take tremendous pleasure in it. Well, what if that's the operative principle? What if the postmodern critique of hierarchy is so wrong that it's actually the opposite? Now, that doesn't mean it can't be corrupted. Institutions get corrupted by deceit and by power all the time, but that doesn't mean that that's their central essence. So I tell young people, maybe responsibility. That's where you'll find what you need, what you desperately need. And I don't say that because I'm shaking a stick at them. I'm saying that because that looks to me like it might be the case. So that seems to work. I mean, again, it seems to work. Yeah. So
Jordan, in 1 second, I want to ask you a little bit about something that you're saying here, mentoring and teaching, and the role of that in a society that really has decided that those who attempt to mentor, those who attempt to teach, are violating a personal sense of authenticity. I want to ask you about that in just 1 second. First, let's talk about how you can save on your business by using stamps.com. So, going to the post office, why would you do that? The post office is great, have a lot of great services, but thanks to stamps.com, you don't have to go to the post office at all or wait in line, do any of that stuff. Instead, you can mail and ship anytime, anywhere, right from your computer. You can send letters, ship packages, and pay less, a lot less, with discounted rates from USPS, UPS, and more. Here at Daily Wire, we've been using stamps.com since 2017. We don't waste our time and we don't waste our money. Stamps.com brings the services of the US Postal Service and UPS directly to your computer. Whether you're a small office sending invoices, a side hustle, Etsy shop shipping out orders, or you're just navigating the hybrid work life, Stamps.com can handle it all with ease. Simply use that computer print official US postage 24/7 for any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere you want to send it. Once your mail is ready, just schedule a pickup or drop it off. With Stamps.com, you get discounts of 40% off. The modern version of self is almost precisely the opposite, and that is that
This is boring.
true meaning is not to be found
I'm gonna go to bed.
in the interaction between you and society. True meaning is to be found in your authentic self, free of society's constraints. So every sort of constraint that can be
Economists
placed
are
on your
always
notion
wrong.
of authentic self-identification is a barrier to happiness. And so biology can be a barrier to happiness. If you're a man,
Dude, economists have been predicting like a total market crash for like 20
if
years.
you're a woman, this means that you're a woman, and anybody who says differently
It's gonna come eventually. Then they're gonna be like, "Told you so," when it finally does happen.
is a barrier to happiness. And
Yeah,
so
I'm gonna go to bed. All right, everybody, have a good night. Thank you for hanging out. I will not be back for another week, but after this week, I will be streaming every night. Actual stuff, actual words and politics and stuff. So everybody have a good one. I'll be back next week. Then nightly streams.